Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Today is a really special day. I have my dear friend, Mr. John Nixon, who is an amazingly talented man, an incredible producer, a great songwriter, an artist in his own right. And he has the podcast that I referred to called Out of the Main. Now, the Docksiders were guests on his podcast about a year ago, and it
Mhm.
was a wonderful experience for us to talk about all things yacht rock, the thing that kind of introduced us to each other. We met John and his brother and family in person when we played in Grosse Pointe, Michigan at the
Right.
Ford House. The family
Mhm.
came out and came to the show. And what's really interesting about the genesis of this project is John has a band called Page 99, and some might say that that's a modern yacht rock
Yes.
musical venture for you. And I listened to some of his tracks when they were releasing some songs, and I was like, wow, this guy is really good. And as the idea crept in about eventually doing a Docksiders record, all of me was really interested in seeing if John was interested in collaborating on the production side of making a Docksiders album. With that being said, the introduction to you, Mr. John Nixon. Thanks for joining me today to talk about this upcoming Docksiders release.
Absolutely. Talking yacht rock, old, new, I don't care. I'm in. Yeah.
Love it, man.
Yeah.
So just give us a brief history
Right.
on what you've done, where you've come from, your musical beginnings, and maybe your take on how we met.
Okay. The quick background is from a musician side. I was at Berklee College of Music from 1985 to 1989 in the music production major. So that was in the studios all the time. And we were studying, being there at 85 to 89, most of the stuff we were studying was techniques that were done in the late 70s to early 80s. So that became sort of how I thought this is how music is to be made. So now you fast forward all these years later, where the yacht rock thing has got its genesis or regeneration, whatever you want to call it, that now I'm in a position sort of business wise, but I'm also in a position now to utilize all of that stuff that I learned back then, the way that music was made, the way things were mic'd, the way things were layered, the way things were mixed, all the sounds that were used, all of that I was able to employ. Now you combine that with, as you mentioned, the podcast Out of the Main, that started as a yacht rock centered podcast, and we've kind of broadened out from there, but we've stayed within that era, mostly 75 to 85, studying the artists, interviewing many of the big names, Kenny Loggins, for example, but also just studying this music. We recently did a deep dive into Bob Clearmountain and the way he mixes, and both of us are learning as we go, and we're just kind of opening up our discovery and our experience and our sort of takeaways to everybody that wants to listen. So Out of the Main we're in our 5th season now.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that. And for those of you audio nerds like John and I, Bob Clearmountain in the 80s was the top of the mountain, right? There
Yeah,
was
he
there
was
was
clearly the
nobody
top of
that
the
made
mountain.
records sound the way that Bob Clearmountain did. There were companies that did like sample packs and like
Yeah.
copying and replicating sounds of his, and talk about an era where, I mean, we can get in a really kind of crazy deep dive here, but the technology that Bob Clearmountain had to work with in the 80s is nowhere near the technology that we all have access to now.
But
And he
much of
was
it we
making
have now is because he used it, and now they model what he did with it.
exactly.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, like some of my, probably, where I was introduced to Bob Clearmountain was on the Big Bam Boom album.
That's it.
The
That's where we
Daryl Hall,
started.
John
Yes.
Oates, man. That record came out, and sonically, I just remember driving to see my grandparents who happen to live in Long Island in New York, and I had a Walkman cassette player, and
Okay.
I listened, no joke,
Yeah.
from Milwaukee to Long Island. It's probably like a 14, 15-hour drive. My parents would break it up with a night on the road, but I listened to that album
Mhm.
I can't even begin to tell you front to back, front to back, front to
Yeah.
back, front. I mean, the entire way there, the entire way back, not knowing that I was a producer in training and not knowing that
Yeah.
that sonic picture that he painted with sound would be part of the blueprint. So
Yeah.
I love the fact that you and I have that sort of commonality that
Isn't
we
that
that
funny?
those
We never
things
even talked about that either.
turn us on, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, that was ABC's Lexicon of Love, had that
Dude.
same sort of Sonic Discovery, Trevor Horn. But
Mhm.
so we
Yeah.
met when you came to Detroit, did a show at the Ford House,
Did we
which is
meet prior? I mean, I know we met in person then, but did we talk any at all prior to that, or were we
no,
commenting on things or nothing? Okay.
no, my brother knew the girl that was doing the booking at the place. So she set up a little thing after to make sure that we could say hey to you guys.
Great.
Because as we were listening, going back to the beginning, is that when we saw, oh, there's a yacht rock concert going to be at the Ford House, I'm like, that's going to be, I don't know, how cheesy is that going to be? But it was June or July or whatever, and it was outside. This is the Ford House. The back of it faces Lake St. Clair, and so you're right there on the water, sitting in lawn chairs.
Beautiful
And I
place.
think we were 2 or 3 songs in, and Tom and I looked at each other and said, "Man, this is way more than I expected." And it didn't have the silly kitsch, but it had the high music quality going. And so that's when Tom slipped away and found the girl that booked you guys. Said, "Yeah, can we talk to them afterwards?" And the idea was to get you on the show because perfect episode was, okay, here's a real live band on the road doing yacht rock. And what is that like? Other than just talking about what they did back in 1975, what's it like for people doing it now?
Sure. Yeah, it was
It was
fun.
great.
That was a really it was great meeting you. And I think from there is when I started doing my dive into you guys, right? Like
Mhm,
obviously I listened to the podcast and it
mhm.
was really flattering that you asked us to be on it and that was a fun episode. But then hearing your original project, your Page 99 project, tell us about where that came from and
Okay, yeah, the name of Page 99, the word page comes from Richard Page, who was a big part of that era, had a band called Pages. Eventually, he became Mr. And
Mhm.
obviously, many people know who they are.
First
And
concert I ever saw was
no
Mr. Mister.
kidding.
Yeah.
Ah, and then 99 is a reference to the Toto song 99. And those were the biggest, at the moment, they were the influences that were driving what we wanted to do. We wanted to touch on the sophisticated, sort of jazz influenced side of yacht rock that mostly comes out of like the Michael McDonald Doobie Brothers era or Steely Dan. But we also, at heart, were wanted to be able to do the occasional big anthem ballad, the David Foster Toto big sound. So that sort of shaped the thing. And going to what I started saying is that now, after all these years, I finally have a place that I can utilize these ideas that I had that were, I couldn't quite execute them back in the 80s because I didn't have the equipment to do it. Now I have the equipment to do it. My musical knowledge has grown much more. So I have all of these things available to me now. And I just thought, I'm going to make this project for the fun of it and we'll see where it goes. And we have a third album coming out in May. But it many of those skills in learning the sonic way that things were done and kind of remembering my education, remembering what I learned being in the studio and all of that were the things that I was able to employ. Then when you text me, like out of the blue, hey, dude, let's make an album. So, it was like we talked about what it was going to be like, and you're like, oh, yeah, drum machine, Lindrum. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, synth bass. Oh, I'm all in on that. And so these are the fun things I like to play with. And if you're willing to, bear with me, it was great.
No, listen, so that's kind of what happened. I remember listening to Page 99 and really spending time with it and you really have a handle on this vibe of music. And like you
Yeah.
said, we can nerd out and get deep into the authentic instruments that you've collected all over these
Yeah.
years. And as I think that, like you said, it's having the proper tools to be able to not replicate, but be able to emulate sort of that
Hmm.
time frame and that era, because these sounds have such a sonic footprint in a lot of those songs that we all grew up listening to and that we revere as being the most iconic songs on earth, some
Yes.
of them, right? Like
Right.
there's other obviously iconic songs and genres, but you've got the tools to create the picture that we are trying to
Yeah, because
convey.
we're trying to replicate or, like you say, imitate a certain era, and there's a lot of people that are doing, quote, "modern sounding yacht rock." There's a difference between doing something that sounds modern, that has a yacht rock tilt to it, but what we're doing with Page 99, and which is what I employed when I was doing, like, the basic bed tracks for you guys, was I'm using the whole process. I'm not just bringing out the older synths. I got, one of my little ones right here, my little JX8P, or
Yep.
JX, yeah, model, but not only do I use those, but I also use the whole process. Okay, how was it done at the time? Well, at the time, you didn't have all the gear and plugins and things available now, so you kinda had to figure out what your sound was going to be, how you were gonna layer your synths, and you record that onto 2 tracks because you don't have 100, right?
Mhm.
But all of that using what kind of preamps they would have used, what kind of EQs they would have used, even though I'm using VST plugin virtual emulations, I'm using them and chaining them in the way they would have been done then. Not and I'm committing to ideas. I'm laying stuff down as though we quote recorded it to tape. I'm
It's
not
great.
doing the everything's in the MIDI realm and it can be tweaked and fixed up into the very end of the mix. No, I'm making commitments because then the next layer you do is based on what you've already committed to.
Yep.
You know,
Yep. Yep.
you're creating layers, you're responding to what's already there. You're not thinking everything can be just rejuggled into the end because that changes
Which
the way you would approach.
Which brings up a really interesting point. There was one particular track, I don't remember which one it was, but I think I rang you back and I said, "Hey, listen, I think it's in the wrong key. We might need to change the key." And
I know.
you went, "This isn't, everything's not in MIDI where we can just lower things by a half a step or raise things by a full step and just make another pass of it. You'd have to go back and physically recreate playing parts,
Mhm.
recalling sounds, recalling EQs, compressions, all of the processing that might go in. So this was a lot of respect for the process. And getting into the making of the record, we talked about that at the very beginning. We wanted to keep, both of us wanted to make this authentic as possible. And I think what we decided to do early on is we said, let's split the duties. So
Yes.
as co-producers, we don't have to carry all of the weight ourselves and then track down this kind of musician or book studio time for that vocalist and then this vocalist and this horn
Mhm.
player. So what I think was beautiful for this project with me, and honestly, it's the first time in my career that I've ever split the responsibility on a project of mine. I've done it many times with other records that I've been producing, some of the Eric
Mhm.
Benet stuff that I've done, the tenor stuff that I've done. I have no problem, sharing that sort of collaborative responsibility. But what this relationship, just speaking from my perspective, was beautiful. And I remember you saying when we got close to sending some of the mixes, like you were like, "Gosh, this was nice for me to kind of stay in my lane and do my thing and not have to worry about all those other pieces." And I think
Right.
once people hear what you and I have created, they're going to hear this really sort of, I think the music conveys how positive this experience was as well. Like
It
the
does.
music, I think sonically is conveying this message that we've learned as a touring entity makes people happy from city to city
Yes.
to city. It's very therapeutic. With that being said, let's get into the making of the record.
All right.
It was pretty simple. You were tasked with building the tracks. You were tasked with, once we decided collaboratively which songs we were going to be recording, which was a process in
Yep.
and of itself. I remember
Fun.
traveling and you and your brother putting together a playlist of ideas that
Yeah.
had certain feelings or certain sonnet. Having a sax was important to us because we
Yes.
have a featured artist in our band, Clay Connor.
Yeah, Clay, right.
So we wanted to have songs that had sax in it. We needed to find songs for the star of our band, a female, right?
Yep,
Erin.
right.
And we've learned as a touring group that there aren't many female yacht rock songs. So to
Nope.
create like what we've created. Let's start at the A&R process that I call it. When we listen through playlists and the impetus of selecting certain songs, we can go song by song once we get there, because I'm planning on talking about each track one at a time.
Okay.
And then, but you could talk just kind of globally what your and your brother's thought process is when you first put together that initial playlist that you sent me.
Well, we wanted to avoid making it sound like you were just doing a cover band version of what you do live. We wanted to separate this from just being a cheesy yacht rock album. It was going to be something different. So we said, let's do songs that aren't the most obvious ones. We're not going to pull out Sailing. We're not going to pull out What a Fool Believes. Let's not do that. And let's do songs that we know were great songs. They either maybe were just missed becoming a hit back at the time, or they were a hit back at the time, but over the years sort of fell off of the cultural psyche. And so when you hear some of these songs that were chosen, you get this nostalgia and you get this, man, I forgot about that song. Oh, I love this song. But you're not so tired of it. You're like, oh my gosh, not Footloose again, please. Right. And then we thought, well, why, you stray a little bit outside of the yacht rock lanes for your show for, um, obvious reasons, good reasons. So we thought, well, let's be a little flexible with what we pick here. We're not just going to be hardline yacht rockers. We're going to entertain the people that love yacht rock, but they don't know what all the specific parameters are. They just know what they want to hear and they enjoy from that era.
Which, like you mentioned, is staying true to what the Docksiders brand is, right?
Yeah.
Our brand, like you mentioned, if we played what the purists, I keep using that word,
That's what we use too.
define yacht rock, we would be playing a very narrow. I mean, it could be like incredibly narrow. Like it could be only songs that Paich and the Percaros and Lukather played on, right? If we
Yeah.
really wanted to get like narrow.
If you ever put on a real precise, clear yacht rock playlist that has nothing that drifts outside of the harbor, as we say, you
Yeah.
realize there's a lot of sameness in the sounds,
Yep. But that's what I think is beautiful about the genre, this wonderful genre. Like there is this interpretive sort of um playground where we can all interpret like songs that might fit in that genre, and that's what we do as the Docksiders. We realize, we have an incredible singer in Aaron in the band,
Right.
and like mentioned earlier, there aren't many traditional yacht rock songs. Nicolette Larson, maybe,
Yeah.
Yvonne Elliman, maybe, like that. I don't think that's
There's a
really.
few other names you probably never heard of, a Charlie Door,
Sure.
yeah.
So we've had to get creative in a way that we kind of blend the soft rock aspect of things
Right.
with the yacht rock majority of what we
But that's
do.
what most people think yacht rock is,
Right.
right? Outside of the yacht rock groups that talk yacht rock all the time, people's general consensus or understanding of what yacht rock is
Yeah.
basically that soft rock. Right or wrong, that, bell cannot be unrung, right?
And we used to have a couple guys in the band that were strict purists.
Yeah.
Like when anything outside of like a certain year
Yeah.
was suggested, we at one point had a guy in the band who was like, I'm not going to be in a band that plays songs like that. And we were
Oh
like,
boy.
well, and we were respectful. We kind of curbed some of the choices based upon that. And we still have what I would consider one yacht rock purist in the band. I'm
Yep.
not going to mention any names, but it's clear that there is a rub every time a song is suggested. Now, it's our responsibility, in my opinion, to play for those people that aren't the yacht rock purists. Those aren't the ones that are necessarily coming to the show, or they're coming to the show and they're hyper analyzing, the how and the why, and you chose that song,
Yeah.
and that's not like that's
For the first
not
10 minutes, and then suddenly they're having fun, and they're
it's
like,
not our core audience, right? Like that just like
Yeah.
the guys in the band that used to be very blinded by other songs weren't really, I felt, the audience that I was building the Docksiders into trying to find. So
Yeah, we saw what happened when you pulled out, was it Waterloo from ABBA, or then there was the Olivia Newton-John stuff. We saw what the crowd did when
it,
you played those songs, man.
it's like no joke. Like
Yeah.
we played a very memorable show this last year in July. We joined Tony Orlando at the Mohegan Sun Arena, and
Mm,
we did 5 of his hits, and the rest of the night in front of 15,000 people were the Docksiders.
yeah.
And he joined us on stage, and we were so honored to be there with him. And what's cool is when we first started playing, we played for rooms that were like 200 people, 150 people,
Mhm. Yep.
and then to move 6 years later into a 15,000 seater, and to see how this music makes 200 people feel versus 15,000 people, it's the same feeling.
Mhm,
It's just
mhm.
replicated because there's more people there. And that's how we've learned that what we do works. And we're going to just continue to build upon what we know works and what our instincts are. And listen, there are a lot of other yacht rock touring bands in the world. You know who I'm talking about. And
Sure.
and I believe our show is very different than those other ones. And no knock on any of the other bands. It's just we're just very different. We're built very differently. Um, I have different skills than some of the other people in bands have, and we're just grateful that we have the opportunity to still take the music to people. Today, hopefully,
Yes.
if you're watching this after today, is the day that we're announcing our new Las Vegas residency
Woo!
spot. I'm just waiting on the green light. As soon as we get that, we will be
Alright.
making a big announcement. We are moving to the Las Vegas Strip that we are
Mm.
super excited about. And in back into the record. Sorry,
Yeah.
I
Yep.
digressed a little bit.
Sorry.
So
Me too.
I am going to bring up track number 2.
Okay.
This track, "Gamble with My Love." And I gotta be honest. When we split the responsibilities, you were working on the music. I was going to record the vocals, produce the vocals, the background vocals, and add any overdubs that we needed outside of what you were building in the studio. So
Right.
guitars,
Soloist.
um, there was ear
That was
candy
kind of it.
things that I
Yeah.
added, right?
Yeah.
And then I was going to mix the album,
Right.
and then we were going to send it out to be mastered. So I didn't put songs in any order throughout this process. I also think it's really interesting to say we started talking.
Hmm.
I looked at the date on the first Pro Tool session for Making Love, which
Mhm.
was the first song we did together
Yeah.
on this record, and it was September 17th.
Yeah.
So we started recording 7 months ago, exactly 7
Yeah.
months ago. But the A&R process probably started a month or 2
At
prior.
least. Yes. You were doing your summer tour, that summer, and you said, "Let's spend this time just brainstorming songs." So that was
Yep.
at least 3, 4 months process prior to starting.
And I remember being on the bus just, like, ingraining that playlist that you sent, and I don't even think I suggested any songs
Not
until we
yet.
started getting deeper
Right.
into the process. So,
Yeah.
you picked this freaking song,
Yeah.
"Gamble with My Love," and I have to be honest with you, I had never heard it before. I love the band that recorded it. Now, not a yacht rock group, in my
No.
opinion, right? Not
No.
at all. It's the Daz Band.
Yes.
Uh,
Which, as I understand, stands for danceable jazz. So,
Hell
yeah.
yeah, and, like, huge fan of that band growing up, and I'd never heard this track, and what is amazing, and I just did this before we talked, I listened to the original and I listened to our version,
Uh-huh.
and it's substantially different,
Yeah.
and you had, uh, an instinct on how you could yachtify, is that a word?
Mhm. Yeah, that's what we use. That's what we
Okay. You had an instinct on how to take this track and make it feel like it belonged on the radio with Kenny Loggins, with Michael McDonald.
Mhm.
And it was a track that I heard from the very beginning, and I felt personally attracted to it. I was like, I got to sing this one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was the lead, it was the first song on the record. Once I had finished everything mixing and started listening, I was like, the record's got to open with "Gamble with My Love." Tell me about "Gamble with My Love," why you felt that song.
You know, I didn't really know this song back then either. It probably came up either on a yacht rock playlist. I don't have Sirius XM anymore. I used to. Somewhere this came up, might have been on the station Yacht Rock Miami, which is a really good yacht rock station that tilts towards the R&B and disco influence. So that's probably where I heard this song. And once I heard it and I was in this sort of mind space of looking for songs, I'm immediately caught by the way it sort of shuffles and grooves. It's got sort of a halftime shuffle. And I thought, well, it's got that. All I got to do is lay out the chords with like a Rhodes on top of that, and I'm halfway there.
It's great, man.
Yeah.
I love the song. I had so much fun. I actually did like multiple days of refining the vocal that I put
There's
on
a
it. Like
lot there. Yeah.
I recorded it and then I went back and changed ad libs and then
Yeah.
I was mixing and I changed more ad libs. Like I really kind of kept setting the microphone up and taking it down, and then I was like, it's good. And then I was like, I gotta fix some other things. And
Yeah.
so I'm really excited about this track. I'm excited about the whole album, but like this song had a really unique thing because I didn't expect to be in love with the
I
track like
know.
this. So kudos to you
But
for
sometimes
having
I
that.
hear a song and I'm like, they're like 80% there, they're 90% there. If they had just done this, this, or this. So it's not a fundamental overhauling of the song in the way it's a reimagining. It's like, man, if they had just made these little things, and that was my approach. I heard what it needed and it just elevated the song into a new place
I
for me.
love it. I
Yeah.
think a really cool, fun thing to do for fans that are really into this record once you get a chance to listen to it would be to find the original version and then listen to our version, or once you hear our version, go find the original and hear the differences in the vocal
Right.
interpretations and the musical interpretations. It's really cool. I think that'll be a fun aspect.
But this should have been
Okay.
a hit back in the day. People just weren't ready for this type of song out of the Dazz Band, so,
You're exactly right,
yeah.
and that was also talked about very early on when you mentioned earlier about how what songs are we gonna find? We wanted to find songs that people might not know, but we're on the cusp, and these, you never know, weird things might happen.
Right. Yep.
Maybe these songs get some life in a really interesting way. Moving on to track number 3.
Hmm.
Wow, another one. The best is yet to come. Nowhere near on my radar. I don't believe I've heard this song before. I don't believe maybe I have because I'm a fan of the artist that originally did. You want to tell everybody who the
Yeah.
artist is?
Yeah, it's Johnny Mathis, but Johnny Mathis made an incredible yacht rock album in the '80s, and I remember the lead single off of that, "Simple," and what an amazing song that was, and I thought it was Al Jarreau at first. People
Yeah,
hear this album and they think it's Al Jarreau. The
absolutely.
title of the album is escaping me, "A Special Part of Me" or something like that. But yeah, and, John Robinson on the drums. I think you know John
I
or have
do.
worked with John, yeah,
He's my friend.
and I just had that anything that John plays on fits my feel. I talk about Jeff Porcaro, I talk about Steve Gadd, but John's feel is my feel, and so going in saying, "Well, if I can just take what John was trying to do, build the drums out from there," again, it all starts there for me, and it was already there,
Yeah,
the song
yeah,
could have been a hit. I forget, I think it's probably even written by somebody big, like Diane
sure.
Warren or something, but it's a song that, again, should have or could have been a hit at the time.
And our singer, Danny Williams, man, uh, he killed the lead vocal on this.
Yeah,
He really his voice is so pure and so clear. He's got such a great tone. I'm very envious of his tone. I've
yeah.
been told that I have a very unique sounding voice, like my voice. I definitely have my thing, but Danny's got a voice. And when I met Danny 20 years ago, I knew this guy was a star. And his voice, he's been my demo singer for
Mm,
years
mm,
prior to doing anything, and he has sang on some great songs that I've written and produced over the years. Most importantly, a song I wrote 20 years ago, he sang called "My Heart Is Here," which is
mm.
on the streaming services. And man, did he bring he's such an artist that can bring a song to life. And I sang all the background vocals on this
Yeah.
particular track, and Danny just killed it. Really
He
excited.
There's so much, uh, like bounce in the groove of this song, and his vocal just fits with the bounce. You know, you don't
Yeah,
think about a singer adding to the groove, but he really did.
he certainly did.
Yeah.
Awesome. The best is yet to come. Moving on to track number 4.
Okay.
This one is
Yeah.
probably, it's so hard to tell you what is my favorite on the record.
Yeah.
I came up with this idea to record this song, and I remember, we were looking for a song for Aaron,
Oh boy.
and we
Yeah.
were looking for a big song for Aaron to sing, and I started thinking back. We performed this song live as the Docksiders one time. It was our second gig. There were
Hmm.
20 people in the room. Nobody knew who we were at the time in our hometown. And I convinced her, like, on stage, I was like, "Can you just try Woman in Love tonight?" And she was like, I was like, "There's nobody here. Like, just
Yeah.
let's I want to hear you do this." Because I hear her singing around the house all the time, and I hear what she is capable of. And sometimes I, have to kind of hold her and say, "This is going to be good. I really think you have this amazing thing." And let me be real. Like, this vocal on the record is absolutely breathtaking.
Yeah.
She recorded this song in a way that I imagined she would, but I still listen to it, and I, like you, I've probably heard this 1,000 times because I'm sitting here over and over, and I'm mixing, and I'm
Yeah.
making small adjustments and tweaks and little. I, I don't think I'll ever get sick of listening to Aaron sing this track.
Man, there's that place going into the second chorus where this builds the pre-chorus and she goes up and kind of carries over and let the backup vocals come in underneath for the pre-chorus, and she just holds this note. First time I heard that, I'm just like, oh, there's that chill up the spine. It's like,
Yeah,
and who's brave enough to take on Barbara? You know, when we were talking about songs, we're thinking, well, you had a little bit of evolution into, well, maybe we should do a couple songs that were hits back in the time, but this would not be if people were listing top 5 Barbra Streisand songs. Even though this one was a hit, this wouldn't be on anyone's list just
sure.
because it's one that's sort of fallen off the radar until you hear it, and then you're like, "Oh my gosh, this song.
Right.
Where's
And
this been all my life?"
I think it's also so attractive to me because of Barry Gibb, right?
Yeah.
Like, that magic that they created together, and clearly Barbara being one of the best ever. And it is like, it's a large task to say,
Yeah.
we're gonna cover a Barbara Streisand song,
Yeah.
and you got to do it in a way that can hopefully bring something unique uh, of
To
your
it.
own to it, so it's not just like a karaoke singer
Right.
singing, a Barbara Streisand in a smoky bar.
Right.
And I think she destroyed this
Yeah.
track. I'm excited for people to hear her
Yeah,
sing
the
this.
bigger hit on that album would have been "Guilty," and it would have
Right.
been easy to do "Guilty."
Easy
But you
call,
said,
right?
"No, let's not do the most obvious one."
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
yep. Awesome.
Yeah.
Moving into track 5. This one, I Just Can't Let Go. I'm a
Mm.
huge fan of the guy that originally wrote and recorded this, and this honestly came from Tony Orlando.
Right.
When I was kind of playing what I call dailies, or what the film industry calls dailies, when you look back at what was recorded that day, I had gotten it to a point where I had recorded our vocal, and a unique twist on this one. So David Pack of Ambrosia wrote this song, and it was on his solo album, and he had my dear friend who's on the wall right above my cap, me and James Ingram.
Yes.
I miss that man so much. I loved James Ingram. He was unbelievably kind to me. I wish he were still here so I could play this song for him.
No kidding.
And Michael McDonald, they sang the background vocals with
Yeah.
David Pack, and of Ambrosia, for those of you that don't know who David Pack is. And Tony suggested doing this as a duet
Yeah.
with me and Aaron. And as I was kind of working through the lyric sheet and trying to figure out how to split, if we were gonna take a lyric and do it as a duet, it is where it is now. And I
Mhm.
personally, I think it works. I think it works as a duet. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's kinda funny, I was bugging you from the beginning, when we were searching for songs, and you were resistant towards doing a duet just conceptually, but here we are.
And, wow, what a I was so attracted to this song
Yep.
many, many years ago. I just
Same.
loved the track. It
Yep.
was so great, and those the melody and the chorus and those harmonies are just it's just he's David Pack, is a master of that
Yeah, that
feel, right? And
solo album is so
that vibe.
good. It
Yeah,
got pulled from, it's not on streaming services all of a sudden. No, so hopefully it comes back. It
right.
disappeared. I don't know
Right,
why.
right. Well, and originally, I think my instinct was, so this coming week in Hartford or in Hartford, Connecticut is Tony's last show. He's retiring from performing. He's not retiring from show business, but his touring is done,
Yeah.
and I'm going to visit him at Mohegan Sun in Connecticut for that last show. And David Pack, I was told, is going to be there, who's
Yeah.
also a dear friend of Tony's. And he has spoken a lot to David about the Docksiders and me, and has shared our version of Biggest Part of Me.
Yeah.
And David has said just amazingly beautiful things. My initial instinct was I was going to see him this coming weekend, and I knew this months ago when we were doing the recording. I I was going to see if he'd be interested in maybe singing it with Aaron, and I would remove my voice
We
from
still can release that as a bonus single down the road.
Still can.
We
That
should.
so stay tuned. You
Yeah,
never
don't
know.
pass up that opportunity.
There
If
might
he's
be some
okay with
cool
it,
stuff.
take
So
it.
I love what you did on this
Yeah.
track too. Like you stayed very true.
It was hard. This one was hard.
I remember you saying this is
Yeah.
ooh, this
Some
is a
weird
meaty
chords
one.
in there, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I had to go through and figure them all out. No one gave me a MIDI file to tell me what the chords are for these songs, and, researching it online, you're not exactly getting accurate transcription, so I just went from the beginning and whew,
Well,
great writing.
there's something important about that, right? Like there was no cheap way around in anything that we did. Same thing with some of these background vocals. Like
Yeah,
in my ear would sit and loop things, and I
yeah,
would sit and I'd hear the top note and I'd hear the bottom note, and then it's where it gets
in the
really
middle.
tricky. Is sometimes they're singing a lot of twos, right?
Right,
Where there's a note that's right next to each other
right,
that's creating a really interesting sort of jazz chord or
correct.
not your typical triad. And a lot of times it would become trial and error where I would sit literally here when I record background vocals. I put the headphones on, one can in and out, and I've got a
Mhm,
microphone to my right, and I will start on just a chorus. I'll start building the stacks and
yeah,
trying to find the notes with a keyboard and then listening to the chord. And I'm just like you. I think, again, when people listen to this album, sonically you're not I think it'll be really easy for people not to hear any cheating, right? We didn't
right.
cheat
No.
and have any sort of we had to figure these masterful productions out.
Yes.
And I remember even there was another track that you said it'll come to me as we're getting
Okay.
into the but you were like, wow,
Yeah, because
this is
sometimes these
a art.
chords are so thick and it isn't obvious, like, you hear the piano player playing Plunk, here's the
Yeah.
chord. He might be playing one set of notes, and then the guitar player is playing a different set of notes, but it adds up into this E minor 7, flat 9, sharp,
Yep.
all very rich chord, but, man, you really and that's what I would do. I would loop sections and just keep playing notes on the keyboard and say, "Well, which ones fit, which ones don't,"
Yep.
and then add it up and look at it and say, "Oh, that's what that
That's
chord is."
yeah, exactly. I did the same thing with vocals.
Yeah.
It was a fun
I
project.
learned so much on this project, I
So
tell
did
you.
I.
And
I
that
really
that
did
is
too.
transcribing and rebuilding songs is an amazing way for anybody to learn about music, not just listen, but tear it apart and rebuild it yourself.
I remember back in the day, I used to have friends that were like, you crank up the boombox. That's how we listened to music back in the
Yeah,
day. And you'd get behind the drum set and play along with the
play
recordings.
along.
That's
Yeah,
how you learn to
yeah.
play. I equate just what you said, the same thing as my development as a producer. I would deconstruct the songs. You
Yeah,
figure and rebuild them in a sequencer back in the day. That's
right.
how I learned how to think. And it's funny you mentioned Richard Page, but I remember in probably 1986, and I had my first sequencer. It was a Casio, it was inside a Casio CZ-1000.
Oh, yeah, I had one of those.
And I rebuilt Broken Wings
Oh,
and I
wow.
rebuilt Kyrie.
Ooh,
And I remember learning those synth parts and
yeah,
then adding them into a sequencer that could then play it back for me, and then
Right.
you could change and make a bass sound and add a bass part, and no clue that I was training,
Learning. Yeah.
learning, deconstructing, and then part by part bringing it back. Anyway, we digress
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's get back into the record.
All right.
Track number 6. I want you to talk about this one.
Oh boy.
This was an interesting
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah, this came late in the process of picking the songs. This is,
Almost at the end.
Let's Hear It for the Boy from the, Footloose soundtrack. Going back to our ideas of, can we stretch outside of yacht rock, and should we? And we both agreed we should. And then we knew we needed another song for Aaron, but we didn't want it to be a ballad, so
Right.
we went back and forth, and I had this song sort of somewhere in the back of my mind. Either I had it in the list and kinda just threw it there on a lark, or I also thought maybe I would approach you and say, "You know, maybe you guys ought to add this one into the show." I said, "I know, there's gonna be nights when people really respond to the non-yacht stuff, and this song will kill," because I know it was a hit at the time, but
Yep.
I don't think it's one that's been played out. I don't think it's one that's obvious to people. If you say Footloose soundtrack, they're gonna think of the song Footloose. They might think of, um, what else was on there? And I know there was that, Ann Wilson, Love, Almost Paradise was
Yep.
on there.
Yep, yep.
But I think when this one comes on, you're like, "Oh, yeah, I kinda forgot about this one," and it is so bouncy and
Yeah,
up and happy, and that's one of the things the yacht rockers talk about. Does it have a bounce? And that's a term that can't really be quantified, but
sure.
this one bounces in its own special way, and I said, "Can I do real synth bass on this one?" You're like, "Have at it, man." 'Cause I
I
love the
love
idea
it.
of synth bass. It
I
is
was gonna be
so offensive to bass players that I enjoy doing it.
I love it, man, and you destroyed this track,
It's
man.
so
Like,
good.
it felt so good from the first listen. Um, and I knew she loved the song. What's amazing about this song, and you didn't know this,
No.
but Aaron's mother used to sing this song to her baby brother.
Man.
So this song has a really special place in Erin's heart, and it really makes her think about her mom
Oh,
and when her siblings were very young.
that's
So
cool.
when you and I talked about it, and I kind of tiptoed over to Erin, and we were looking for that one extra song,
Yeah.
she was like, I saw her light up in a way that she really typically doesn't do. She's very cautious, and she's very um you know, she almost second guesses it was so with the talent that that woman has. She's very like second guessing of whether or not that's the right move. So sometimes it takes me to
Yeah.
kind of push her over the
I
edge and
think
say,
that's common, though. I wouldn't call that her
yeah,
an exception in that way. I think a lot of, especially frontline singers,
yeah,
have that in them.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, this had
absolutely.
all the old real stuff in it too. Like I showed you my little guy there. I also got my
Oh yeah,
little Juno
Juno.
106 copy. I got a JX8P over here. I have a DX7 over here. I got an Alpha Juno. All of that stuff. So that's the stuff that I used on this, and that's why I told you that we can't change keys late on.
This was the
I
song.
Yeah, yeah,
This was the song that I said, maybe, can we maybe bring it down a half step? You're like,
yeah,
you were
yeah,
totally cool. You were, if we needed to, I'm sure we would have figured it out. But
yeah.
you were like, and then I kind of went,
You're
you
like,
know what? I
never
like
mind."
that edge of maybe it's a little too high, but maybe it's not. So I think vocally this sits really
It
well with
does.
her, and
Yeah.
she killed it. Moving on. This was um this was kind of a leap of faith for me. I got to be
Ah,
honest. So I wrote and recorded this song 23 years ago in 2000.
yeah,
And the reason this song was so special to me is I wrote this for my now wife.
yeah.
We were dating, and these words were very special and very, very meaningful. And when I went back and listened to songs of mine that could be considered soft rock or that had the potential to feel like it belonged in a certain era, melodically, it felt like this. The stacks of the background vocals were very obvious to me. And I have never given, like I said, my music to some other producer and said, reimagine have complete open
Mhm.
field to do what you will, and I'm gonna trust in the fact that it's gonna come back. I think it's a testament to how amazing I think you are as a musician and as a producer. I felt comfortable enough to do that, and I gotta be real with you, dude, like, you floored me with your production of this track. I mean, I had no clue what to expect, and on the first listen, that sort of ba-da-bum-bum,
Right.
ba-da-bum-bum,
Yep.
it's so perfect.
It's funny because you asked me, "Can we yachtify this song?" And as soon as I heard it, it's kind of built on a progression that is, this 1, 6, 4, 5 kind of thing, which is a very traditional, um, progression, but that is a common thing in yacht rock that they start with this 1, 6, 4, 5, and put that extra motion, bum, 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 which you kind of had in the guitar part that was in there. It was
Yep,
sort of doing that.
yep,
Again, I'm hearing it, but it's not all the way there. And I thought if I bring that forward, then that's a very common starting point for a yacht rock track. Those first 2 chords, the wah, ba, 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 ba. Then it kind of goes off from there in a myriad of ways, depending on what you're writing. But this one sat right there. It's almost like I could see it and you couldn't,
yeah,
you know?
and that's and that's what I've learned as I've aged. I've learned that the best projects I've been a part of have been 100% collaborative because we might be looking at the song from the same set of ears, right? Or we each are listening to it in our own way, but we have our own unique perspective of how we're interpreting the song. And sometimes as the writer of a song, I'm too close
Yes.
to being objective enough to say, what could this use to,
Yeah.
sometimes your instinct's right on and it feels great and you get lucky.
Yep.
And then sometimes it's like, and because I think this song has had so much in my history and it's been around for 23 years, it was like, I don't know what to do.
I know.
It's
Well,
just, I
you'd
hear
already
it
done what you thought it was, right?
well,
In a
23
way.
years ago,
Yeah.
which I
Yeah.
must admit, I had a different set of skills back
Sure.
then. I didn't have the experience I had back then. I listened to the old recording and I cringe because that was the best I could do. And
Yeah.
I had hopes that I could, get to a place where I feel like I am now, where
Yeah.
I'm making. I said to my wife as we were mixing, because she's in and out of the studio frequently. I said, I really said these words. I said, the 16-year-old Kevin Suker would be blown away
Blown
by
away.
the
You would.
53-year-old Kevin Suker. Like,
Yeah.
that just should tell you about my journey personally. Like, at 16, I wanted to make music at such a high level, uh, so badly.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, and I just didn't have the tools. Like you said, I couldn't
Just
afford the gear, and
exactly the same place. Yep.
I
It's
didn't have the
here,
experience.
but
You know what I
yeah,
mean? And
how
and
do you
and
get it
not
out?
I'm not saying that I'm the top of the mountain, but I'm just really content with my set of skills right now. I'm really happy, um,
Same.
being able to do what I do and to collaborate with other like-minded
And
people.
there's a place for this music now, so,
Agreed,
that's good.
right?
We were far enough along in the process at this time where you gave me complete freedom because you trusted me, and then I felt like I can do what I wanna do
Yeah,
without having to sort of center and lane it, without having to try and play anything safe,
yeah.
in any of these because I was able to you almost I don't think you ever, like, told me to restart anything,
No,
and
never.
I was able to hand everything off to you and never worried, you know?
It's
So,
awesome. Awesome. Moving right along. Let's get into this one. Now, we have a
yeah,
very special person to thank for suggesting this song.
right.
Mr. Dave Grohl
Yeah.
of the Foo
Who would
Fighters.
imagine that, right?
Listen, I saw a social media post where Dave was saying he's a huge fan of AM Gold,
Yeah.
right?
That I
AM
believe.
AM
Yeah,
Gold radio, and
yeah,
he said, um, "You need to do this song by Andy Gold."
yeah.
Is that his name? Andy Gold, yeah.
Andrew Gold, he yeah.
Andrew
Yeah,
Gold.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he's like, Not the song that everybody knows by Andrew Gold,
Yes.
which is escaping me right now.
Thank you for being a friend from
Thank
Golden Girls.
Right. But he's like, "You need to do this song, Never Let Her Slip Away." And he was mentioning this to another yacht rock band, and we gotta be honest, we were like, "We can do that song."
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
We're gonna do that song. And, So we have a really great relationship with Butch Vig, the producer, the masterful producer.
Garbage was his main band, or still is.
Garbage, and I
Yep.
mean, he produced Nirvana's
Right.
Nevermind
Yep.
album. He's a legendary producer,
Absolutely.
and he's from our home state of Wisconsin. And I used to work at his recording studio back in the day in Madison called
Oh,
Smart Studios. Never met him back then because he was doing some just larger than life things, and was
yeah.
we weren't in the studio when he and Garbage were in the studio. But Clay, our saxophonist, is has played in a number of bands with the three principals of Garbage for years, because Clay's from originally from Milwaukee, but made his impact in the Madison music scene, and knows Butch very well. So we initially reached out to see if Butch would produce this song.
Right.
And I remember kind of catching Butch at a time that it just didn't make sense for him time wise to do it. So we said, let's do it anyways.
Yeah.
And we haven't sent it to him yet. We're waiting till it's mastered so Butch can hear it. My ultimate hope is that, we can get it to Dave Grohl and just see what, it'd be great to hear if Dave would
Well, he's the one that
react
wanted to
to
hear
it,
it,
right?
so yeah.
Yeah.
But this is such a quirky song too, and we decided to not avoid the quirk of it. We weren't
Yep.
gonna try and, quote, "smarten it up" because it was kind of a silly little ditty. We just thought, "Well, let's embrace that, and
Yeah.
let's just do our sound to that." And it we'll get to it in a later song, but I think by having this sort of quirky nod on there allowed the album again to stretch its parameters a little bit again.
Absolutely.
And so I think we'll get to why that's useful.
Fun song to sing background vocals on too.
I
I had a
bet,
good time.
yeah.
Danny killed this song also. Danny sings the lead vocal on this and just killed it. Moving on. This one is, I believe, going to be a sleeper on the record. It's track number 9, which is Close to the Back.
Yeah.
But man, this track you destroyed just from the first piano, the intro. There's this comfortable shoe feeling about this song.
Yeah.
This was a song that Maxine Nightingale made famous, and I believe the original version was in mono. It wasn't a stereo recording.
That's all I ever found was mono. So made for AM radio.
It
That'll
was
help.
an AM radio hit, right?
Right.
And you'll know this song. People that are listening to our record, you're gonna say, "Oh my gosh, I remember this track. This is got that familiar." I think I remember sitting in the dentist office and
Yeah.
listening overhead to this song multiple times, right?
It perfectly fits the description we talked about at the beginning of a song that was a hit. We recognize that it was a hit, but completely fell off of people's radar after it had hit its peak. You don't hear this song on 70s on 7 or yacht rock radio much, but when you hear it, you're like, "Oh my gosh, I remember this song." And then it's who did it?
Yep.
Because you don't know, because it was it but it's back here in your nostalgia brain, and when you hear it, it gives you that, "Oh yeah, this one. Oh my god."
Yeah. And Aaron, of course, just
Yeah.
destroys this as well. This is a really perfect marriage of
What a melody.
what
Whew.
the record. I know, crazy. And you listen, you had this instinct of putting a saxophone solo in the song. There's no sax solo in this track, the original.
Not originally. No.
And you wrote
Yeah.
a section.
Yeah, in order to incorporate that, yeah, I wanted to have a section sort of in the traditional jazzy side of yacht rock, the Steely Dan side of yacht rock. You
Amazing.
go to a whole new key and do a whole new set of
Yeah.
chords for
Yeah.
the soloist. It doesn't necessarily connect to the rest of the song. It's just a great vehicle for being able to have a bridge where otherwise there wasn't a bridge.
Exactly. This is another good comparison if you're listening to the record and you want to go listen to the original and then listen to our
Oh, yeah.
version.
Yeah.
There will be some substantial,
Ours will be wider, that's for
yep,
sure.
much wider, right? There's actually information on each side. Okay, moving into this one. This one, I felt this was probably the most obvious choice on the record of a
Yes.
hit.
Right.
And it was also, I knew I had to pay tribute to this band. If we're putting out an album, and it wasn't going to be Hold the Line, and it wasn't going
Right.
to be Rosanna, and it wasn't going to be
Africa.
Africa.
Yeah.
It
So in
was,
that sense, it's deeper,
yeah, yeah. but I don't even know where this peaked, like single wise. I didn't look at any of
I
that
thought
stuff.
we recently did a thing about Toto. I think this got up to, like, number 6, so it was a significant hit, but even not their biggest ballad, probably. That's probably, the one from Toto 4,
Yeah,
that
right.
one's escaping me now.
Yeah, right. It's Erin's favorite song. If she were here, she'd be screaming it right now.
Yep.
But yeah. Again, great guitar playing on this. Mike Standel, our guitar player, um, and Christian Brady, an amazing guitar player that I met here in Las Vegas. They collaborated on this track. Christian plays the solo in the outro.
Oh, I didn't know
Just
it
as the
was
fade
okay.
starts to happen,
Uh-huh.
Mickey only played part of it, and I wanted the solo to continue, so Christian picks
Oh,
up. If you listen very closely, there's a
okay.
tonal difference between the guitar solo where it ends as the fade starts and where it comes back in as it
Okay.
fades out,
Alright.
and Christian just shredded. Huge fan of Steve Lukather,
Yeah.
and shredded that. That was fun recording those guys, and, but again, we played very safe with this track. This was
We did. I wanted to, I didn't wanna reinvent it. I wouldn't know how to reinvent it, you
s
know?
some
But
songs are just
yeah,
perfect the
I
way
mean,
they are,
the
right?
99 of page 99 is from Toto, yeah, like I told you, so I wasn't going to suggest redoing it in any new fashion. There's some differences,
Yep.
but I really enjoyed, kinda having to do my own take on the orchestration that's
Yeah.
on this too.
Oh,
It's
you
one of
killed
my
it.
better orchestrations for a pop song that I've ever done for any
Sounds great.
purpose, so I
You
won't hold
killed it.
you back, by the way. When I
That's
was
right.
looking down, I had to look up.
Yes,
It's gonna
yes,
kill
yes.
me. Couldn't get off this podcast without that. But yeah, so this is probably their 4th, 5th, biggest song, so it's not like we went for the most obvious.
Right. Moving on to what we talked about earlier. This is the first song we recorded. It was the first song that, after you guys sent me that podcast, that I chose is what we should get into.
Mhm.
Didn't feel like it was gonna be the right song for me to sing. And again, this felt so yachty to me.
Mhm.
Dennis Henderson is the original artist, and I want to say all of the biggest names at the time played on this original recording.
Yeah, I have the record, and it doesn't tell you necessarily who plays on which song, but it's all the biggest names. It's, the Porcaros, it's Page, it's Abe Laboriel, it's Nathan East probably. I know Nathan East probably played bass on most of this record,
Yep.
because that came up as a discussion in one of the yacht rock groups, but, it's one of those songs that most people have never heard of Finnis Henderson,
Hmm.
and therefore, most people have never heard this song, but you only need to get about a minute into this song, and you get it, and it's a hit to you, even
Yeah.
if you've never heard it. It's so obvious. You're singing along by the time it gets to the 2nd chorus.
And I remember Aaron and I sang the backgrounds together, and I built that before we ever put a lead vocal on it. And we had Justin Rodriguez, who was in the Docksiders here in Las Vegas. I don't think you've seen him. He's not. He
No.
didn't tour with us. So he was
Okay.
our Las Vegas singer, an incredible entertainer, an incredible singer. We were honored to have him in the band. He recently was hired by Frankie Valli as one of the Four Seasons now. He's
Oh,
touring with
geez.
Frankie.
Yeah.
So damn you, Frankie. We love Justin. We want him back. Justin originally sang lead on this, and then the transition happened with him going to Frankie Valli, and it felt strange for me as a band leader to have somebody sing a track that wasn't really necessarily going to be performing with the Docksiders
Yeah.
anymore due to his other obligations. But we wish him absolutely nothing but the best. So let's move right into this next. Let's move right into this next track. This is the last track of the record. Thank you for spending your time with me.
Yeah.
We didn't really plan spending an hour talking, but I had a feeling it was going
No.
to digress into some
Yeah.
really cool things.
But I
This
was
track,
texting you behind the scenes, and, that was the wrong thread, so don't worry
got it,
about it.
got it.
Yeah.
So this song was super important to me. Uh, L. Russell Brown, uh, who actually discovered the Docksiders.
Mhm.
Larry wrote "Tie Yellow Ribbon Round the Old Oak Tree." He wrote "Knock Three Times." He wrote "Come on, Marianne." His his catalog is so unbelievably deep. Larry discovered us on Thanksgiving night, I want to say of 2019. on a YouTube dive, and I needed to pay tribute to him. And
Mhm.
this was the first song he sent me that night that he introduced himself to me. He said, "I wrote this song for the Bee Gees back in the day, and they didn't cut it. I guess they were only recording songs that they had written." And he sent this to me, and he said, um, "I want Kevin Suker to figure this one out." And I started working on it 5 or 6 years ago, and
Yeah.
again, an odd song from the perspective of it had measures of 6/4 and measures of 4/4, and mathematically, I mean, 6/4 and 4/4 can work. It just
Yes.
never felt like it caught um, the bounce that we talked about. Like it
Yes.
never really had the bounce because you were counting some extra beats in
Yes.
the chorus and in a verse. And I kind of knew what needed to be removed. And I remember sending it to you and saying, "This is my thought. Like, can we remove those two beats here?" And then you just said, let me go to work on it." And I remember it was so quick. You sent me a couple like notebook sketches sonically of where you were hearing it. I think we made a couple other little tweaks together, and then it was done. Like you destroyed this track as well.
Well, yeah, we had to figure out what the song was because it was kinda buried in the fact that it was a demo written for a different artist at a different time, so it
Yeah.
had little weirdness things in it from our perspective that we sorta had to figure out, what can we sorta distill this down to? Once we had that picture, it was still, the chorus of it is what you might call a little bubblegummy or a little quirky, it's light, it's very,
Yeah.
um
I love the chorus. Yeah.
but that's what going back to the Andrew Gold song, saying having that quirky song sorta stretched the boundary a little bit where this one now feels like it fits,
Yep. Yep.
you know?
And an amazing sort of tribute to me to close the record out too. I think that it just puts the bow on it for me personally because of what Larry means to me, and
Yeah,
how important this song was into, getting the
yeah.
Docksiders here. The Docksiders wouldn't be in Las Vegas without Larry Brown.
Oh,
Larry introduced me to Tony Orlando, and to tie it even full circle, we did a version of Tie Yellow Ribbon that Tony sang on with me. We did a duet on it, and J.R. Robinson played on that track too.
there you
So
go.
like all of these sort of tie-ins of mentions that we had, I think
Yeah.
make this
Well,
record.
we record this music and do these projects as much for we want them to be successful,
Yeah.
obviously. We're not putting it out there and hoping that it fails. But we do it at heart for the love of the music, to the point where if I enjoy making this project from beginning to end and don't make a dollar out of it, I'm still happy because I got other places for making my dollars. This is for what I enjoy and what I want to appreciate, what I want to pay homage to. So doing a song on your record that is personal to you is important.
Yeah, and let's be really clear. Like I approached this from the perspective of there's really no money to be made in recording music anymore. It's just
No.
gone. Like I just watched a Rick Beato episode where he was talking to somebody about the corruption at radio that changed in like the 1990s, where rock music went
Payola.
away
Yep.
because there were two giant corporations that took over essentially all of the radio stations in the country.
Right.
And now you have one or two people basically saying this is what everybody's going to listen to. It took away all the mom and pop radio stations where one city or one station could break an artist, which happened to everybody. Everybody's story is because
Yes.
some station in San Diego, California decided to take a chance on a song that they loved, and it spread like wildfire around the country. Those days
Yeah.
are gone.
We have a station in Detroit here called WRIF radio, rock radio riff, and Arthur Penhollow was his name, a guy that did the, I think it was a 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock PM slot, so the drive time thing. Legendary, legendary, biggest, possibly FM radio guy out of Detroit. He was the very last DJ that was allowed to program his own show.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Just so you guys know that are listening and that don't know, DJs right now have no control over
No,
what songs are
they're
played.
just the voice between.
They're the voice in between songs, and gone are the days of there being, that's why you're not hearing a lot of new artists anymore too, because radio, which it still blows my mind. it's still it blows my mind how important radio still is, right? Like it's
Mhm.
an archaic technology,
Yeah.
FM radio. Like who I I listen to Spotify or I listen to Apple Music or I listen to my own cultivated playlists in the car. I'm not tuning in any local radio stations anymore because I
No.
don't want to hear what they're forcing me to listen to, right?
Yeah.
Like so, but that it changes the game. So when we made this album, I have no delusions that we are ever going to make a dollar. As a matter of fact, we're running an Indiegogo campaign because this album had real cost to Aaron and I, right?
Yeah.
We've invested in musicians, we've invested in mastering, we've invested in the artwork. Listen, uh, printing vinyl has to be done in Europe now. There's a
Yeah.
2.5 to 3 month lead time. It's expensive to
Just
have
wait till
these.
you get my bill, man.
I can't wait to see it. Please send it to the accounts receivable department. We're on a net
Right.
3-year pay period, so
Yeah, I
just
bet.
hang tight with me.
That's
Um,
great.
and this is a passion project for me too.
Sure. Me
Like
too. Yeah.
it's literally hopeful. Will people hear it? My hopes are that it people will listen to this. My hopes are that it just doesn't go up on Spotify and it lands in the void of 27 billion other tracks that are released every day. But that's why we tour, right? We
That's why
hope
you
to
play
get
shows. You'll move them at the
people to
shows. Yep.
learn of us, and we hope to maybe put some CDs in some hands
You will.
of
You will.
people, and some vinyl in some hands of some people.
Mhm.
And I just want to thank you, man. Like this project, I hope is not the end of us
No, I'm already starting to think
creatively
about what
working
the second
together.
one ought to look like. It can't look the same as the first. That's what we have to figure out, how
Yeah,
to do it again, but not do it again.
that's exactly right, man. You were an absolute uh, joy and pleasure, and man, I think us older guys we could teach a lot of the younger guys how to be professional too. Like you no joke.
Yeah.
Like I remember being like choosing a song, and you're like, okay, stand by, and like 2 days later, I had a track, and it
Yeah.
was like, wow. And it was like that when we picked every song. It was not like I don't even think there was like a lag. Once we kind
No.
of solidified a song, you were just on it,
I'm
and
a momentum guy. If I don't keep
I am too.
moving on something, I run into it'll just lag, and then it'll sag, and then it'll be done. I have to keep moving. If the idea's in my head,
Yep.
I have to keep moving on it.
Yep. Awesome. I can't thank you enough, man. I can't wait for
Oh,
people to hear these
yeah.
songs. Thank you for spending over an hour of your time with me.
Yeah,
We're gonna
no
cut this
problem.
up in little pieces, and we'll probably eventually upload the whole thing for people to see if they have the patience to sit for an hour and 7
Some
minutes.
people do.
That's right.
Yeah.
But thank you, man. I
Alright, bro.
appreciate you. I look forward to chatting soon.
Yeah, bet. You bet.
Thanks, everybody.
Alright.